He was a man who had everything money could buy, living in a mansion so grand that it seemed more like a palace than a home from the outside. The walls were tall and white, with marble steps leading to enormous doors that gleamed in the morning sun. The gardens surrounding his house were perfectly trimmed, fountains bubbling gently, and rare flowers blooming in colors so vivid they looked painted. Every morning, the sun would rise over his estate, casting golden light across his perfectly kept lawns, and the world seemed to move at a slower, more luxurious pace around him. The billionaire had built his fortune from nothing. A boy who once dreamed in a small, cramped room now walked through rooms larger than most houses. His achievements were known around the world, yet very few people had seen him in his private life. He was known for his discipline, waking up early, exercising, and carefully planning every detail of his day. His staff called him efficient and precise. Yet they also whispered about how unusual his ways were, because he expected perfection in everything, from the way his morning coffee was served to how his papers were stacked in the study. Inside, his chamber reflected his personality. Everything in its place, nothing out of order. The walls were lined with shelves holding rare books and art collected from all corners of the globe. A giant chandelier hung from the ceiling, sparkling like a cascade of diamonds, while the bed, larger than a small car, was covered in fine silk sheets that shimmered softly under the light. His chamber was more than just a bedroom. It was a place of power, a command center where he could plan, reflect, and sometimes just enjoy the silence. Even though he had millions, perhaps billions, he lived a life of routine, a life that followed patterns as carefully as a clock. Every day was almost identical. Wake up, exercise, breakfast prepared by his private chef, meetings, calls, and then the solitude of his chamber where he worked, read, or sometimes just sat and thought. He liked order, but there was a quiet loneliness that no amount of wealth could erase. Friends were few, and most people who came near him were either employees or business associates. Yet he rarely complained because he believed in the power of his own mind and the life he had created. This particular morning began just like any other. The sun spilling over the marble floors, his favorite music playing softly in the background, and the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. He moved through his chambers with the precision of someone who knew exactly what each moment of his day would bring. Yet there was a strange feeling in the air, a small, unexplainable tension, as if the house itself was waiting for something. His instincts, honed by years of experience in business and life, told him that something unusual was about to happen, though he could not imagine what. He paused at the entrance to his chamber, fingers brushing the polished doorknob, feeling its cool surface under his touch. The room beyond was familiar, every detail memorized from years of living there. Yet his heart beat a little faster, curiosity and an odd sense of suspense mixing together. He opened the door slowly, expecting the usual scene of perfection. The soft light through the curtains, the neat arrangement of furniture. But even as he stepped inside, he could not shake the feeling that something had changed, something that would make this morning different from any other. Outside his walls, the world continued as normal. Yet inside, every sound seemed louder, every movement more noticeable. Even the gentle rustle of the curtains and the morning breeze seemed to carry a message he could not yet understand. For a man who had seen the rise and fall of companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and traveled to the most exclusive places in the world, this moment was strange, unusual, and thrilling. His mind, always sharp and calculating, tried to make sense of the subtle signs, but the truth was, nothing in his experience could prepare him for what awaited behind the door. He moved further into the room, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, and yet everything appeared normal at first glance. But beneath the surface, the air felt different, charged with anticipation, as if the room itself was holding a secret. Something was about to happen, something that would make him question what he knew about his world, about control, about expectations. For a billionaire who had always believed he could predict and manage every situation, the possibility that he could be surprised was both unsettling and exciting. Little did he know, The moment he opened that door would change the course of his day, and perhaps even his life, forever. This morning, in the quiet luxury of his chamber, a scene awaited him that would make him stop, blink, and simply stare in disbelief. For a man who had everything, nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to see. The morning carried on as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet the billionaire could not shake the strange feeling that clung to him like a shadow. He moved through the halls of his mansion, each step echoing softly against the marble floors, and every familiar sight seemed somehow different, as if the house itself had been holding its breath overnight. He tried to focus on his routine, pouring himself a cup of coffee, checking his messages, but his mind kept drifting back to that subtle sense of change, a whisper of something out of place that he could not yet identify. As he walked toward the living room, he noticed small details that seemed off. A chair slightly angled differently, a book moved from its usual spot. Even the curtains that usually fell perfectly straight were now slightly uneven. It was not a dramatic change, nothing that would alarm anyone else. Yet for someone like him, a man who noticed every detail, it was enough to spark curiosity and a slight edge of worry. He stopped, looking around carefully, wondering if perhaps he had been distracted and missed something the night before. His mind raced through possibilities, the rational and the absurd. Could a staff member have entered the chamber without telling him? Had he left something unlocked? Or worse, had an unexpected guest arrived, someone bold enough to enter the heart of his private world? Each thought made his heart beat faster. Yet he tried to remain calm, because panic was not a luxury he allowed himself. He decided to check the chamber once more, his instincts insisting that something awaited him there. Something that would explain the odd tension in the air. As he approached the chamber door, he noticed that the handle seemed colder than usual, almost like it carried a memory of someone else's touch. He paused for a moment, fingers hovering over the knob, listening intently for any sound. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning, yet even that quiet seemed heavier than normal, more deliberate, like the room itself was preparing him for what was to come. Slowly, he turned the knob, and the door creaked open, revealing the familiar space bathed in morning light. At first, everything appeared normal, the bed neatly made, the chandelier catching the sun's rays, the shelves of rare books standing in perfect order. Yet as he stepped inside, a movement in the corner of his eye made him freeze. Something, or someone, was there, hiding just beyond his immediate view. His mind struggled to make sense of it, scanning for explanations, imagining scenarios, each more improbable than the last. He had faced challenges in business that demanded quick thinking and strategy. Yet this was different. This was personal, intimate, and unexpected. Slowly, he moved closer to the source of movement, the thrill of uncertainty mingling with a rising sense of danger. He noticed the faintest shift, the softest sound, a whisper of air that told him he was not alone. His years of success had taught him control, but control was useless when confronted with surprise. When he reached the center of the room, his eyes finally focused, and the unbelievable began to unfold before him. He saw something so extraordinary that for a moment, he could not even breathe. A scene so completely unlike anything he had imagined, yet real, undeniable. It was not a threat, not a danger, but the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing made his heart race. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again, each time confirming that reality had shifted. He could feel the room changing around him, not in its structure, but in the way it demanded his attention, in the way it forced him to stop, to absorb, to feel. He had been prepared for meetings, negotiations, emergencies, but never for a moment like this. Time seemed to stretch, every second magnifying the impact of the scene before him. He realized that this was a turning point, a moment that would be remembered, a story to tell, perhaps, yet also a personal revelation he would carry with him in silence. The mystery of the chamber, the hidden tension, and the impossible sight before him combined into a single truth. His life, no matter how controlled, could still surprise him, still amaze him, still change in an instant. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, knowing that the next moments would define what he did next. and how he would respond to something that even billions of dollars could not prepare him for. The billionaire stood frozen for a moment, heart racing faster than it had in years, his eyes fixed on what he saw, and yet his mind struggled to accept the reality before him. It was as if the laws of his controlled life had been rewritten in an instant. Nothing in his experience, nothing in his calculated world, had prepared him for this. A part of him wanted to turn away, to step back into the safety of routine. Yet another part was drawn forward, a magnetic pull he could not resist. He took a slow, careful step toward the center of the chamber, each movement deliberate, every sense heightened. The air smelled faintly of something unusual, a scent he could not identify, sweet, earthy, and unfamiliar all at once. His eyes darted around the room, trying to see if it was a trick of light or shadow, yet everything was exactly where it should be, except for the impossible element, waiting silently, demanding acknowledgement. It was small at first, a detail almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. His breath caught in his chest, his mind racing through explanations. Could it be an elaborate prank, a test by his staff, or something far stranger? He scanned a room again, noticing the fine details, the way the sunlight hit the floor, the shimmer on the silk sheets, the faint reflections in the chandelier. Everything was calm, serene, yet beneath that calm, a secret pulsed, alive and waiting. As he stepped closer, he realized that it was not just the presence of something unusual, but the way it seemed to respond to him. Almost as if it knew he was there, almost as if it had been waiting for him. His pulse quickened, thoughts spinning. This was no ordinary event, no simple surprise. It was an encounter that would challenge everything he believed about control, expectation, and the predictability of his life. For a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals, solved impossible business crises, and traveled the world with confidence, this was a different kind of test, not a skill, but a perception, patience, and courage. The object, or perhaps it was a being, was completely still, yet it radiated a presence so intense that it filled the room. He felt it even before he fully saw it. A silent energy that made him aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every thought. He crouched slightly, cautious but drawn forward by curiosity. His eyes widened as he caught the first clear glimpse, and the disbelief returned stronger than before. He had seen wealth, power, and luxury in ways most people could only dream of, yet this moment stripped all of that away, leaving only wonder, awe, and a sense of something profoundly personal. He could feel his pulse in his ears, feel the adrenaline, feel the shift in the room, as if the very air had changed its rhythm. Time seemed to stretch longer than reality allowed, each second pulling him deeper into the mystery. He could almost hear a soft hum, barely audible, yet vibrating in his chest, a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. And then he realized something, that the surprise before him was not random, not accidental, but deliberate, designed for him to see, to feel, to understand. Something that was meant to teach him a lesson no contract, no business deal, no wealth could ever teach. He stood motionless for a long moment, absorbing the impossibility of it all. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand an explanation, yet no words would come. The truth was more powerful than language, more shocking than anything he could have imagined. This was the kind of moment that changed perspectives, that forced even the most disciplined mind to pause, reflect, and feel. He had always believed he could control everything in his life, yet here, control had no meaning, and amazement was all that remained. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out, drawn by a mix of fear and fascination. His fingers trembled slightly, anticipation building with each step. And as he got closer, the impossible became even more vivid, more real, more undeniable. This was a moment that would stay with him forever, a story beyond wealth, power, or luxury, a moment that reminded him that life, even in its most controlled and ordered form, could still surprise him in ways that left him breathless. As he inched closer, the billionaire's heart pounded like a drum, every beat echoing through his chest. The impossible figure, or object, stood quietly, almost as if it had been waiting for him to notice it. A strange mix of fear and fascination gripped him, stronger than anything he had ever felt. He had faced negotiations that could make or break empires, storms that threatened his fortune, and challenges that demanded every ounce of his intellect. Yet this was different completely, unpredictable, and deeply personal. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught the edges of what he saw, reflecting in colors that seemed unreal, almost magical, almost otherworldly. It was not a trick of light, nor a reflection, nor anything he could rationalize easily. He stepped closer, every movement deliberate, mind racing through possibilities, yet none of them fit the reality before him. The closer he got, the more he realized that this was not random, that somehow everything had been arranged deliberately to reach him in this precise moment. A soft sound reached his ears, almost imperceptible at first, like the whisper of silk against marble, and yet it made him stop. Every nerve alert, his instincts screamed caution, yet curiosity pulled him forward, stronger than fear, stronger than logic. He tried to focus, to analyze, but the more he looked, the more impossible it became to explain what he was seeing. His mind, trained to calculate and predict, stumbled, struggling to grasp the reality. Then he noticed a movement, subtle but undeniable, a flicker, a blink, a small shift that made the impossible undeniable. His eyes widened as the figure, or object, moved in a way that seemed almost alive, almost aware. It responded not just to his presence, but to his thoughts, as if it could sense his disbelief, his curiosity, his awe. The billionaire had always believed control was power. That knowledge was security, but here, he realized that life had powers beyond any calculation, beyond any strategy. He slowed, almost holding his breath, afraid that sudden action would break the fragile magic of the moment. His eyes scanned every detail, noticing textures, patterns, and colors that seemed impossible, exquisite, and alive. The room itself seemed to transform around him. The familiar chamber now a stage for something extraordinary. The air hummed faintly, as if alive with anticipation, and the silence pressed against him like a living thing, demanding attention, demanding awe. Every instinct in him told him to step back, yet every curiosity pulled him forward. The thrill of the unknown, the draw of discovery, made his pulse race faster than any business deal ever had. He took another step, and then another, until finally he was close enough to see the detail that made his breath catch. The part that made him stop entirely, his eyes fixed, unable to look away, mind racing, heart pounding. And for the first time in years, he felt completely powerless. It was not danger, and it was not a threat. It was something so unexpected, so impossibly arranged, that he could not believe it. Yet he could not deny it. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to place this moment here, for him, and him alone. A scene so carefully crafted, yet so natural, that it seemed almost unreal. He reached out slightly, trembling, not sure if he was ready to accept the reality, yet knowing he could not turn away. And then a soft sound, like a sigh or a whisper, filled the room, making him stop mid-step. His mind struggled to process it, to rationalize it, to decide if it was real. His heart raced, his thoughts spun, yet the presence before him remained calm, patient, almost expectant, as if it had been waiting for him to understand, to feel, to recognize its significance. He realized in that moment that nothing in his life had prepared him for this, not his wealth, not his power, not his control. This was a lesson beyond any classroom, beyond any business strategy, beyond anything money could buy. It was personal, intimate, and utterly extraordinary, and he understood that the next moments would define not just his day, but a part of himself that he had never known. For a moment, the billionaire could do nothing but stare, his mind spinning, heart racing, and every instinct telling him that this moment would change everything. He had always been a man in control, a man who measured risks, planned strategies, and anticipated outcomes. Yet here he was powerless, unable to predict, unable to command, facing something entirely outside his experience. The impossibility of it made him pause. Yet the curiosity he had carried all his life pushed him forward. He took a careful step closer, trying to understand the figure, or object, before him. The more he looked, the more details emerged. Details that seemed almost impossible in their precision, beauty, and subtlety. Each movement, each shadow, each reflection seemed intentional, as if the room itself was part of a secret performance. The billionaire's mind raced, thinking of every logical explanation, yet none of them fit. The scene defied reason, and that defiance made it irresistible. He leaned in slightly, noticing things he had missed at first glance, the smallest details that suddenly made the impossible undeniable. The object, or perhaps it was alive, seemed to have its own rhythm, a quiet pulse that matched his own heartbeat. His eyes widened as he realized that it was more than just a surprise, more than a trick. It was a revelation, something designed to teach, to shock, to awaken. He felt a strange combination of fear and wonder, emotions he had not allowed himself in years. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, soft but unmistakable, like a whisper carried by the morning breeze. It seemed to come from the very thing he had been staring at, and yet also from all around the room. The billionaire froze, listening carefully, every sense alert, heart hammering. He had faced storms that threatened his fortune, threats that could topple empires. Yet this was different. It demanded patience, reflection, and a willingness to accept the impossible. He crouched slightly, trying to see closer, every instinct screaming caution, yet the pull of discovery was stronger. He reached out slowly, fingers trembling, and for a brief moment he thought about stepping back, abandoning the curiosity that had led him here, but something inside told him that retreat was not an option, that this moment, impossible as it seemed, was meant to be experienced fully, without hesitation, without fear. The closer he got, the more alive the scene became, almost as if it responded to his thoughts, his presence, his very intention. He could feel it pulsing with energy, subtle yet undeniable. And he understood that this was no ordinary surprise, no ordinary secret. This was something that had been hidden, waiting for him, arranged carefully, deliberately, to reveal itself in this precise instant. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, heart pounding in anticipation of the revelation he was about to witness. And then, just as he leaned in fully, the truth began to unfold, slowly, dramatically, like a curtain rising on a stage. The billionaire's eyes widened further as the impossible became clear, a sight that defied logic yet could not be denied. It was beautiful, shocking, and utterly unforgettable. The moment was not just about surprise. It was about understanding, about seeing something that would change the way he viewed the world, his life, and perhaps even himself. For the first time in years, he felt completely alive, every nerve tingling, every sense heightened. He realized that the world was far bigger, far stranger, and far more unpredictable than he had ever allowed himself to believe. And in that moment, as he stood in the center of his chamber, staring at the unimaginable, he knew that his life would never be the same, that the memory of this day, this impossible revelation, would stay with him forever, guiding him, humbling him, inspiring him in ways he could not yet comprehend. The billionaire stood motionless for a moment, still absorbing what he had just seen, yet his mind refused to rest, racing to make sense of the impossible scene before him. He had always believed that knowledge was power, that control was the ultimate weapon. But here, none of that seemed to matter. He was confronted with a mystery that no calculation could solve, a truth that demanded patience, attention, and courage. He took a step closer, eyes scanning every detail, noticing things he had not seen before. The air seemed charged, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting for him to understand. His instincts told him to proceed cautiously, yet his curiosity overpowered caution, urging him to investigate further. He moved around the chamber slowly, carefully, examining every corner, every object, every subtle clue, searching for an explanation that could restore the sense of control he had always relied upon. He questioned everything he saw, wondering if it could be a trick, a coincidence, or some clever arrangement. Yet nothing about the scene made sense in the way he understood the world. It was too precise, too intentional, too deliberate to be accidental. He realized that someone, or something, had orchestrated this to reveal itself at the perfect moment, to capture his attention, to awaken something inside him that he had long ignored. His eyes caught a detail that made him pause again. A small object, almost hidden, yet impossible to miss once noticed. It seemed to radiate a quiet energy, as if it held a secret meant only for him. The billionaire crouched slightly, examining it closely, tracing its edges with his eyes, feeling the weight of its significance without fully understanding it yet. Each second stretched longer, anticipation building, his pulse quickening as he inched closer to the truth. He realized that this was no ordinary discovery, no simple surprise. It was a lesson, a message, a revelation carefully arranged to challenge him, to teach him, to awaken him. He could feel it in his bones, in his heartbeat, in the air around him, that this moment carried meaning far beyond what he had imagined. The billionaire had achieved everything he had ever wanted in life. Yet he had never experienced anything like this, something that wealth and power could never provide. Slowly, he reached out to touch the object, his hand trembling slightly. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a mix of fear, excitement, and awe. He felt the texture, the temperature, the energy it seemed to radiate, and for the first time, he understood that what he had discovered was not just a surprise, but a revelation about life, about expectations, and about the limits of control. A soft sound echoed through the chamber, faint yet unmistakable, like a whisper meant only for him. It made him pause, heart racing, and he realized that he was not just observing, he was participating, becoming part of a story that had been waiting for him. The room seemed to shift subtly, the light changing, the shadows dancing, and he felt an unexpected warmth, a sense of connection, as if the impossible had been waiting for his recognition to come alive. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, understanding that this moment was more than just a shock or a surprise. It was a lesson about humility, about wonder, about embracing the unexpected. His years of experience, his billions, his careful planning, all of it had prepared him for business, not for the marvel that now stood before him. He realized that life, in its most extraordinary form, often arrives when least expected, challenging assumptions, inspiring awe, and teaching lessons money could never buy. For a long moment, he simply stood there, absorbing it all, letting the mystery wash over him, letting the disbelief and amazement settle into something deeper, something unforgettable. He knew that this experience would stay with him forever, shaping how he viewed the world, how he approached life, and how he understood the boundaries of possibility. In that chamber, surrounded by luxury and silence, he had found something priceless, a moment of true revelation that would linger in his mind. Long after the doors were closed, the billionaire's eyes widened as he finally saw the full picture, the impossible truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Every detail now made sense. Every subtle hint and unusual movement fell into place. The chamber, the object, the energy, it was all part of a carefully orchestrated surprise, one that demanded his full attention and opened his mind to a reality he had never imagined. He felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of awe-shock and profound respect for the unseen hands that had arranged this moment. It was not dangerous nor threatening, yet it held a power greater than anything he had ever experienced. He realized that this was a message, a revelation designed to teach him something deeper about life, about expectation, and about the boundaries of human perception. Every instinct in him told him to step back, to retreat to the safety of logic and control, yet his curiosity rooted him in place, compelling him to embrace the extraordinary. As he took a careful step forward, the layers of the mystery slowly unfolded, revealing details he had missed at first. Small inscriptions, subtle symbols, patterns in the light and shadow, all pointing to a story far larger than the chamber itself. It was a puzzle a masterpiece of subtlety and precision, crafted to challenge him, to awaken a sense of wonder he had long forgotten. The billionaire had always valued control, efficiency, and knowledge. Yet here, all of that mattered little. Because this moment was about feeling, about seeing beyond the obvious, about embracing the unexpected. He crouched slightly, examining one small detail closer, and suddenly it hit him. The significance, the purpose, the reason this had all been arranged, it was not about wealth or power. It was about perspective, about humility, about realizing that no matter how much you achieve, life can still surprise you, can still astonish you, and can still teach you lessons that cannot be bought or planned. The realization filled him with a deep, unexpected emotion, something he had rarely allowed himself to feel. The soft hum that had filled the room now felt like a voice, not speaking in words, but in understanding, in connection, in revelation. He could feel it resonating through him, awakening a part of his mind that had been dormant. The billionaire understood that the true value of this moment was not in what he had seen, but in how it made him feel, how it shifted his perception, how it reminded him of the power of wonder, surprise, and awe. He stepped fully into the center of the chamber, letting himself absorb every detail, every subtle nuance, every element of the impossible arrangement. He realized that life had orchestrated this moment specifically for him, to remind him that no matter how precise or controlled one's life may be, there's always room for the extraordinary, always room for amazement, always room to be humbled, inspired, and transformed. Tears threatened his eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming beauty and significance of what he had discovered. He had faced countless challenges in business, solved problems that seemed impossible, and navigated complexities that would overwhelm most, yet nothing in his life had prepared him for this. This was not just a surprise, it was a revelation, a gift, a reminder that even the most disciplined, most powerful, most successful person can encounter moments that leave them speechless, awestruck, and profoundly moved. For the first time in years, the billionaire allowed himself to simply feel, to simply be present, to recognize the extraordinary in the ordinary. The chamber, once a place of control and solitude, had transformed into a sanctuary of wonder, a place where the impossible became real and the unimaginable became undeniable. He understood, in that moment, that life's greatest lessons often arrive unexpectedly. That true value lies not in wealth, but in moments like this, moments that touch the heart and mind in ways money cannot measure. He stood there for a long time, letting the revelation sink in, letting the sense of awe and humility wash over him, knowing that when he finally stepped away, he would not be the same person, that the memory of this morning, of this impossible moment, would remain with him forever, guiding him, inspiring him, and reminding him that life is full of wonders waiting to be discovered. The billionaire finally exhaled, feeling the weight of the revelation settle over him like a quiet wave. His mind was still racing, heart still pounding. Yet there was a sense of calm now, a deep understanding that this moment was bigger than wealth, bigger than power, bigger than anything he had ever known. He looked around his chamber with new eyes, seeing it not as a place of control, but as a space of possibility, mystery, and wonder. He stepped fully back, allowing himself to reflect on everything that had happened, the impossible scene, the subtle signs, the quiet energy. It all made sense now, not in a way that could be explained logically, but in a way that touched him deeply. The lesson was clear. No matter how much one achieves, no matter how perfectly one plans, life always has the power to surprise, to humble, to teach, and to inspire. For a man who had spent decades mastering his world, this realization was humbling, yet freeing. He understood that the true measure of life was not the wealth amassed or the deals conquered, but the moments that awaken the soul, moments that make one pause, wonder, and feel alive in a way that money alone could never provide. The chamber, once a symbol of luxury and perfection, now felt like a sanctuary of insight, a place where the extraordinary could touch even the most disciplined mind. He moved to the window and looked out over his estate. The gardens, the fountains, the marble paths bathed in sunlight. Everything was as it had always been, yet he could see it differently now, through the lens of awe and possibility. Even the familiar seemed extraordinary. Even the ordinary shimmered with potential. The billionaire smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached beyond the surface, feeling a connection to the world that he had almost forgotten. Turning back to the chamber, he allowed himself one final glance at the object or presence or secret that had caused this awakening. It seemed to glow softly in the morning light, as if acknowledging his understanding. Recognizing the moment had reached its conclusion, he felt a sense of gratitude, not for the wealth or comfort around him, but for this singular experience, this impossible, unforgettable lesson that had arrived unannounced, yet with perfect timing. He reflected on how quickly life can shift, how moments of wonder often come when least expected, and how even the most prepared and powerful person can be humbled. The experience reminded him that control is not always possible, that certainty is often an illusion, and that the greatest treasures in life are sometimes invisible, subtle, and deeply personal. He realized that these lessons, though intangible, are the ones that stay with you forever, shaping who you are and how you see the world. For the first time in years, he felt completely present, fully alive, and profoundly connected to something larger than himself. He had chased success, wealth, and recognition for decades. Yet this single morning, this single impossible revelation, had given him more than any deal, any contract, or any investment ever could. He understood that life's true riches are not counted in numbers, but in moments that transform perception, inspire wonder, and awaken the heart. Slowly, he moved away from the chamber, each step lighter than before, carrying with him the knowledge that life's surprises are what make it extraordinary, that even in the midst of luxury, comfort, and control, there is room for astonishment, awe, and growth. And as he closed the door behind him, he knew that he would never forget this morning, never forget the lesson it taught, and never forget the feeling of being humbled, amazed, and truly alive. The billionaire paused at the threshold one last time. Looking back with gratitude, a quiet smile on his face, he understood that life is full of moments like this, waiting to be discovered, waiting to transform, waiting to remind us that no matter who we are never beyond wonder, and that even the richest, most powerful person can be astonished, inspired, and forever changed by the unexpected.